What's going on, everybody? TripleCrown24 back today with a new Rewind episode. We are going back to Strongsville, Ohio for the Strongsville Card Show that was in April. If you want to go see the vlogs, they'll be linked in the description down below. If you have seen them before, you'll probably remember that I didn't do too much at the show. A lot of the clips that you'll see are me passing on cards, as well as the reasons that I did pass on said cards or buying cards for Mike that I dug out of some of the slab boxes. Therefore, I thought it'd be kind of fun today to look at some of the cards that I didn't buy and kind of talk about how their markets have fared since the show took place, since that's something that I don't normally do in this series. But I did make a few deals. We'll talk about those as well. Thought that might be a little interesting wrinkle in today's Rewind episode. We're starting off with this Larry Fitzgerald Gold X-Fractor. Now, there were some cards that were passes for me where I kind of thought about them and I said, maybe if the circumstances were right, I would go back and try to get them for that price again. There were also times where it was a hard pass. This one was the latter. You can see there the 825 sticker written in Sharpie on the plastic holder. And you'll have to I'll apologize here because I'm going to be switching screens quite a bit, going between tabs. And I am going over to Card Ladder to show you some of the sales here. On this Larry Fitzgerald, I'm still not seeing anything close to the 825 number. The strongest sale is actually the most recent one. It is the 623 in a PSA 9. Now, on these uncirculated cards, you might notice from the little thumbnail preview of the video there that the card is encased. That is how they came from Topps back in the day. The gold X-Fractors were uncirculated box toppers. However, uncirculated cards back then, quite a bit different than what we see today with stuff coming back from Panini customer service that has a little sticker on it. It's usually encased in either a one-touch or a top loader, forms of card storage that are more generally accepted, whereas a lot of these are in snap-tight cases. If you don't know what they are, well, that's probably a good thing because personally, I have a large disdain for these snap-tight cases. But in my opinion, they aren't the best for protecting the cards. A lot of times I've excavated cards out of snap-tight cases where the surfaces are completely cooked on them. There's really no way of telling until you get it out of the case. You can kind of guess based on how much the case is scratched up, but again, no way to tell for sure. Therefore, even thinking that these cards are guaranteed to get at least a 9, I wouldn't be so confident in that because a lot of times I see them where they definitely wouldn't be 9s. It would be much lower. So this was one of those where I passed on it. I have no regrets on passing on it. The funny thing is that a few of these cards I saw either at the Muller show the following weekend, or I would see them at shows throughout the summer when I ran into these dealers again, and those cards were still there. Usually a good sign to me that if no one else scooped them up, then it wasn't that good of a deal. Especially at larger shows where people might be willing to pay stronger. In fact, I think I might have even seen that Larry Fitzgerald at the National this past summer as well, which goes to show it probably was priced too high for a lot of people. Moving over to this one, this was a John Cena autograph I was looking at, but the big one was a Tom Brady autograph as well. It was a Topps Heritage. It was one of those where I really liked the card, but not necessarily the assigned grade. However, I don't know if I would want to crack it out because it was a PSA Authentic. I talk about this in the video, but PSA Authentics scare me a little bit when people do that just because it makes me wonder what is wrong with the card where they wouldn't get a numerical grade on it. Maybe some people are great snobs. They don't want anything less than a 9. I could understand that, but it also makes me wonder, is there a wrinkle that would cause it to be a 5? Is there a dinged corner that I'm not really seeing in the slab? It leads to more questions than it gives answers, in my opinion, and that's why I typically avoid it. Also, it had a 9 auto. I couldn't really tell why that was, but a 9 auto is also somewhat taboo in today's landscape, especially for modern cards. With how many autographs are out there, it shouldn't be that hard to find a 10 auto. Even guys who are notoriously streaky with their signatures, there's still quite a few 10 quality autos out there. To me, it's something that is also distracting from the card, which I ended up passing on it. Sales-wise, again, these were a couple of cards that I still saw in cases later on down the road. And therefore, I wasn't, it kind of gave me a little bit more reassurance about passing on them then and there. But on day one, I did make two deals. I bought a Barry Larkin autograph. I was bundling a few things from Mike. I bought another card with it, paid $40 for the two cards, got 55 out of them. It's a $15 increase. I'm pretty pleased with that. That's usually what I'm aiming for. If I'm spending $40 on cards, if I can get 50 out of it, then I'm perfectly content with that. 55 or 60 would be great. In that case, 55, we'll gladly take that. I also bought a few slabs. They were retail parallel NFL slabs, things that move a lot. Usually you have to get a deal on them to move them. And I kind of bought them because I was bored in a sense, where I'd only purchased really the two cards at the start of the day and maybe a few things out of the value boxes, as well as a couple things from Mike, but nothing that I could really take home and talk about. Therefore, I got a little happy to spend some money, and usually that doesn't work out too well. In this case, it panned out, right? I made money on it. That's better than losing money, but not really the ROI that I'm looking for there. So it is what it is. Again, a gain is better than a loss, but that was really it from the day one part. Now, when we go over to day two, the first card that I really set my focus on, and is the name of the video, is that Anthony Vulpi Blue Refractor. If you watch my national vlogs, you'll know that I did end up picking up this card. It just happened to come a few months later. I think it was day 4 of the show when I bought it. I was much closer on my set then. I think I was down to the final 2 cards at that point in time. Actually, correction, final 3. I needed Vulpi, I needed Bryce Harper, and I needed Logan O'Hoppe. I ended up buying the Vulpi PSA 10 there. What really let me cave on that decision was that I had already purchased the Gunnar Henderson in a 10. Once I got down to the final few cards, I kind of thought to myself, you know what? If I need to get a 10, I'll get the 10. I ended up getting it for, I think, about $100 cheaper than what it was at this point in time. And it goes to show that sometimes buying a player because they get hot at the start of the season is not always the best decision. Volpe got off to a red hot start, kind of has cooled down since then. He hasn't been able to recapture what he did those first couple of weeks of the year, which led to a decline in a lot of his prices. Therefore, I was able to kind of swoop in. Patience definitely paid off with that one. I definitely was not intending to come back for it, but that's just kind of the way it worked itself out. So there you go. Patience pays off sometimes when you're looking at certain cards. Next up was this Ellie De La Cruz Speckle auto that I passed on. He had a PSA 10, and I showed examples of both 9s and 10s that had sold. I say this in the video, but he had it at $2,500 and told me that he thought it might be a steal at that price. And I said in my video that I disagreed with that. I didn't think it was a steal at that price. And if we go take a look at it since then, there is actually a sale of it for $2,500. It was an auction. It was actually ran from the PSA eBay account. It happened back in August. Most of the other sales, though, not quite there. A lot of the 9s have stuck around the same price. I've noticed a few of the 10s creep up a little bit. Like, for example, this 10 here did get up to $2,200 in the summer. And really just looking at the other sales, they were a lot stronger than they were back when this Strongsville show took place, I will say, which is kind of interesting to me because around my area, a lot of people have what I'm calling Ellie fatigue, where is he still the most popular player baseball wise in Cincinnati? Of course he is, because, well, he's the star of the Reds. But I've had a lot more people asking me for guys like Bobby Witt Jr. or Shohei Ohtani, kind of branching out from different teams. I don't know if that has to do with the Reds largely underperforming this year. They're going to miss the playoffs, or if people have just been consumed by the Ellie hype for really a year, maybe even 2 years at this point now, where they're kind of moving on to different cards. But high-end Ellie stuff has not really done all that well for me. I've kind of gotten a little bit more selective in what I have picked up of Ellie. Even some of the lower-end stuff has been difficult to move. There's interest in it, but people seem to walk past it more often. Therefore, look, I could have definitely gotten the 2,500 out of it. It's possible. I mean, the PSA account sold theirs for 2,500. Apologies if the dog barking in the background got in the way. He always seems to do that when the videos start recording. But yeah, in all likelihood, I don't think I would have gotten to that number. I definitely wouldn't have wanted to hold it that long where I would have to have it 3 months, especially for a card like that. That's one that I'd probably want to move off of a little quicker just because Ellie isn't as established. Don't get me wrong, he's having a pretty solid season by all accounts. Just a card, though, that I wouldn't really feel comfortable because I'm not a huge Bowman guy. I'm more of an Ellie guy than I am a Bowman guy. So let's go back over to the recap. I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought there. You'll see in the vlog, I passed on the Ellie. A few of the other cards he had I thought were a little higher than where I wanted to be, so I passed on those as well. Here's another interesting one, the Frank Thomas. This was a 1993 Finest Refractor. He had 1,600 on it. I forget off the top of my head, but I believe he was willing to come down to either 13 or 14. In my eyes, I felt like if I was really patient enough, I could get to 15 on it, but that might have to be through eBay. If it was through eBay, then paying 13 or 14 would probably mean that I would end up losing after fees and all that, which made it where I probably should have just passed on it. If we go and look at the sales history on this Frank Thomas, believe it or not, there is a sale at his asking price. Now, I have no idea if this is the same one. I did not go match up the cert numbers or anything, but I did think it was interesting that, in fact, just yesterday when I'm recording this, there was a sale at 1,600 for this card. You can see, though, about a week before, 1,025 on the 9. It was a 9, which is important to note. This is a 9 OC. I don't really count that. And then anything else, this is the stuff that I would have been seeing back when I initially was looking at the card. These were the most recent sales on it. So yeah, again, this is one of those where that price did eventually get met. I have no clue if that was the same one or not. But again, even if I had sold it at 1,600, I might have been able to come away with a little bit of a gain on it if I had gone after that Frank Thomas and sold it for that price. But the gain would have been minimal. And if I'm going to put in, say, $1,400, to me, I kind of weigh the opportunity cost. That could be a collection that I buy, or I could buy a lot of cards. And by a lot, I mean multiple cards grouped, bundled together, not necessarily a large quantity of cards. But I would have more opportunities to use those funds in a way that is going to realize the revenue much faster than it would have in this case. If you think about it, let's say that was my card and I had just sold it yesterday. That would have been kind of a 5-month hold time for that card for not really much reward in that sense. In that case, I'm kind of glad that I'm passed because, again, if I would have had to sell it on eBay to get that number, the fees would have negated most of the gain there. So once more, pleased that I ended up passing on that one. If I were to say I had any regrets on any other cards, this is probably the one that I would have taken a second look at if I had to choose one, but I'm still not, I don't feel like I missed out on any of these, which is good for me. And my reflection is that when I'm analyzing things, it is nice to analyze the cards that I am buying, but it's also nice to analyze the things that I'm not buying, the decisions that I'm not making, because those decisions are ultimately almost as important, if not as important, as the cards that I am deciding to buy. And if we go over to the last part, the Phil Mickelson auto, that is one of the cards I did end up purchasing. To recap the entire show, I did purchase a couple of cards out of a value box from the Anthony Vulpi seller. He had a few value boxes out. I think it was 2 or 3 cards, $40 worth. I ended up getting 4605 out of them. That's not terrible. I mean, it's about a 15% gain. That's acceptable to me. Value boxes sometimes it's a little easier to stomach when it's a small gain, just because the cost that I'm putting into it, it's only $40. That's a much smaller portion of my bankroll than, say, 1,400 like the Frank Thomas, or 2,000 plus like I would have had to do with the Brady auto. And then the Phil Mickelson, that worked out extremely well for me. Ended up being $75. I sold it to a friend of mine who then ended up selling it. So we both were able to get a little bit something out of it. And that's always nice when people who I sell them to. Look, once I move a card to someone, I'm not really too concerned with how it does. You know, if they get more out of it. I know not too long ago, my Amon Ra, or what was my Amon Ra 101 Black Select sold, and trust me, we'll talk about that in a future rewind episode because I have a lot of thoughts on that particular sale. But those things happen, right? But it's also nice when, you know, it goes to someone who, you know, will appreciate it, or if they make something on it, you know, I'm happy for them too, because I got what I wanted out of it. So that was the recap for Strongsville. To give you an update on my overall win rate and my margin, you can see the win rate is up a little bit, the margin is down a little bit. What that says to me is that I'm willing to make more deals right now in a compromise of having a little less of a profit margin, which is fine. My win rate, you know, if my margin is going down, then my win rate needs to be higher to kind of offset that. And the quality of the wins needs to be better as well, which kind of ties into that margin. But still, 17% is not bad. Next year, my strategy is going to be to lower my desired margin in exchange for having a higher revenue stream. And that might also mean that my win rate drops a little bit. But if the overall revenue increases as a result of doing that, then that's ultimately the goal. I still have some benchmarks that I want to meet. I want to at least keep my win rate at 80%. I feel like that's a good benchmark. And my margin, I haven't decided exactly where it's going to be yet, but probably closer to 10 to 15. I might talk strategy in a future video if anybody's curious to hear that, but those are usually things that I keep a little tighter to the chest unless someone asks. So that was the recap for Strongsville. Again, I said this in the Strongsville recap, or the Strongsville vlog, I should say, when I was recapping, that I was mostly going for the experience, to hang out with friends that I only get to see once in a while. If I got any cards out of it, then that would have been nice. I did end up getting some cards. I didn't get the one big card that I was hoping for, but it was still an enjoyable trip, and all 4 of the deals I made were profitable. I can't really ask for too much more. That is it for me, though. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Stay safe. Be kind.